This video will go over how to factor simple trinomials. In math, a simple trinomial is defined as a polynomial expression that has three terms and is in the form x squared plus bx plus c, where b and c could be any integer, and where the coefficient of the x squared term is equal to 1. So we're not talking about polynomial expressions where we have a coefficient of 2 or 3 or something else in front of the x squared, only coefficient of 1 in front of the x squared. So again, factoring is the opposite process of expanding. So if our factored form is x plus 3 times x plus 4, then we know to expand that, we would multiply the x by the x to get x squared. We multiply x by positive 4 to get positive 4x. We multiply the 3 by x to get positive 3x. So combined, those two terms would make positive 7x. And we multiply the 3 by the 4 to get positive 12. So the expanded form of this polynomial is x squared plus 7x plus 12. The opposite process is factoring. So that's what we want to look at today, is how do we start from x squared plus 7x plus 12 and get that back into its factored form. So in general, there's some things that we notice here. So for this particular example, we see that the 4x and the 3x combine to give us the 7x in the expanded form. So in other words, this 3 and this 4 had to add to give 7. We also see that the 12 comes from the multiplication of the 3 and the 4. So if we take the 3 multiplied by 4, that gives us the 12 that's in the expanded form. So in general, when we're factoring what we call a simple trinomial, we look for two numbers that add to b, right? So in this case, the 3 plus the 4 add to the 7. So we want two numbers that will add to b, and also those same two numbers should multiply to c. So in this case, the 3 and the 4 multiply to give 12. So in general, those two numbers that we're finding, we want them to add to give b, and we want those two numbers to multiply to give the answer c. Okay, so here's a couple of examples. So we're going to factor the trinomial x squared minus 5x plus 6. So this is in the form of a simple trinomial. It's in the form x squared plus bx plus c. So if I were to identify the values of b and c here, b would equal negative 5 and c would equal 6. So because it's a simple trinomial, we're looking for two numbers that will add to give b, and those same two numbers have to multiply to give c, which is 6. Okay. So sometimes you'll be able to identify those numbers right away, and other times it may take you a little bit more time. It might depend on how large these values are for b and for c. If you don't know what the numbers are right away, then what I suggest is you first start with the multiplication statement, because there's going to be fewer number values that will work for that multiplication statement than for that addition statement. So for that multiplication statement, I start thinking about numbers that will multiply to give me 6. Well, I have 1 times 6 will multiply to give 6. 2 times 3 multiplies to 6. I could list 6 times 1 as well, but it doesn't really matter which order I place these numbers in here. But especially since that b value is negative, even if that b value is positive, there's a chance that one or both of these values might be negative numbers. So I also think about negative values that might multiply to give 6. Negative 1 times negative 6 would result in positive 6, as well as negative 2 times negative 3 also results in positive 6. So now I have these 4 options, and that's all the options using integer values that multiply to give 6. I look at all of my options and I look at which one option will also work for the addition statement. And I see that negative 2 plus negative 3 will equal negative 5. So if I put negative 2 and negative 3 in that first statement, it works. And if I put negative 2 and negative 3 in that second statement, it works. So when we list the factored form here, I have the original trinomial, x squared minus 5x plus 6, in factored form will be the product of 2 binomials. I know to get that x squared term, I need an x times an x when we expand. Okay. And then the 2 numbers we determined was the negative 2 and negative 3. Negative 2 goes in one of the brackets and negative 3 goes in the other bracket. And it doesn't matter the order of those 2 brackets. So I could list the factored form as x minus 2 times x minus 3, or I could say the factored form is x minus 3 times x minus 2. And either way, if I expand, I can use expanding again to check that my answer is correct. So here I would have x times x gives me x squared. X times negative 3 is a negative 3x. And negative 2 times x gives me a negative 2x. Combined, the negative 3x and the negative 2x give me negative 5x. And negative 2 times negative 3 gives me the positive 6 here. So this is the factored form for this simple trinomial. Now, sometimes you may have factoring questions where you have more than one factoring method that has to be used. Here, for example, I noticed right away that all 3 of these terms have a common factor of 2. And so before I even start with trinomial factoring, because this isn't even a simple trinomial to begin with because of this coefficient of 2 here instead of a coefficient of 1. So before I even look at trinomial factoring, I want to try common factoring first, because that's going to make the question simpler to do. So I'm first going to take out a common factor of 2. So I divide each of these terms by 2. 2x squared divided by 2 is x squared. Negative 6x divided by 2 gives me negative 3x. And negative 20 divided by 2 is a negative 10. And now what's left in this bracket here is a simple trinomial. And so I'm going to repeat this same process over here. So to factor that simple trinomial, I need 2 numbers that will add to give negative 3. And those same 2 numbers have to multiply to give negative 10. And again, I could list out all the options that multiply to negative 10 and look for the one option that will add to negative 3. Or if you see what the 2 numbers should be right from the beginning, you don't need to make this list of multiplication values. So here, the values that will work are negative 5 and positive 2 will add to negative 3, and negative 5 and positive 2 will multiply to negative 10. So when I finish factoring this, I have still the common factor of 2. That doesn't go away. That has to stay there. And then the factored form of this simple trinomial is the product of 2 binomials where x is the first term of each binomial, so we get that x squared. And then the two numbers that we've determined here fall into place. So x minus 5 and x plus 2. So 2 times x minus 5 times x plus 2 is the factored form of this trinomial.